Good evening, and welcome. I am your host, Dr. Sinister. Tonight we journey deep into the haunted hollows of the Appalachian Mountains, a place where shadows linger a little too long, and the whispers of the dead drift on the cold mountain air. This is the tale of an ancient home stained with the blood of a family torn apart by rage and an axe. But be warned, some spirits refuse to rest, so gather close, if you dare, as we uncover the dark legend of the Appalachian Axeman. The Holt family, city dwellers at heart, yearned for a life away from the urban chaos. When Eldridge and Isabella stumbled upon a beautiful rustic house deep in the Appalachian Mountains, they were captivated. With its sturdy wooden beams, broad hearth, and aged but majestic architecture, the home seemed to promise a tranquil escape. Gregory and Roseanne, their children, were equally enchanted, rushing through the rooms with laughter. But from the moment they moved in, an uneasy silence hung in the air, thick and cloying. The once bright chatter of the children dimmed, and both Eldridge and Isabella found themselves feeling constantly watched. The wind howled at night, creeping through the old cracks and floorboards, but no amount of reason could shake the oppressive weight that seemed to press upon them. As the days turned to weeks, their unease became harder to ignore. Eldridge would lie awake at night, listening to the peculiar sounds that seemed to crawl through the walls. Footsteps echoed down the hall, slow and heavy, as though some unknown visitor roamed the house at night. Isabella, ever the skeptic, assured him it was just the old house settling, but even she couldn't explain the chills she felt as she walked through the rooms, shadows seeming to shift at the corners of her vision. Their nights soon became plagued with disturbances. Isabella would wake, heart racing, certain she felt a presence looming at the foot of their bed. She would sit up, only to find the darkness empty. The children awoke screaming more often than not, nightmares leaving them shaking, their small voices barely able to recount what they'd seen. Each told of a man in a hat who watched them from the shadows, his face twist and grinning, holding a gleaming axe. The unease reached its peak one evening when a loud, splintering crash resounded through the house. Eldridge ran to investigate, fearing a break-in, but found no broken doors or windows. The walls were unmarred, the furniture untouched, yet a strange chill lingered, as if something had moved through the house, disturbing only the air itself. Eldridge and Isabella couldn't shake the feeling that there was something wrong with their new home. They decided to investigate its history, searching for anything that could explain the eerie happenings. After days of digging through old records, they found an article in the town archives, buried under decades of dust. The article detailed a horrific incident in their very house. Decades prior, a man named George Weathers had lived there with his family. One night he took up an axe and murdered his wife and children in cold blood. The townspeople discovered the bodies, but George had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only the blood-soaked memory of his crime. It says here he disappeared. Eldridge read aloud to Isabella, his voice shaking, but some say his spirit never left, that he's still in the house. Isabella felt a chill settle over her. Do you think that's what we've been hearing? Eldridge only nodded, his face pale. There was an unspoken understanding between them now, a feeling that their home was not entirely theirs. The family's fear grew. Eldridge contacted the church, and Father McCarthy, a seasoned priest, agreed to visit. The priest arrived, casting wary glances as he walked through the house. as he moved from room to room, sprinkling holy water and muttering prayers. A change came over his face. His confidence faded, his hands trembled, and his prayers grew quieter. Upon reaching the children's room, Father McCarthy froze, staring at a spot just above the bed. The air grew deathly cold, and his breath hung visibly before him, ghostly and white. "What is it, Father?" Eldridge asked, heart pounding. The priest turned to him, eyes wide with terror. "This place, it's cursed," he whispered. "I cannot stay here." And with that, Father McCarthy fled the house, abandoning the family without so much as a backward glance. No amount of pleading or calls would bring him back, and soon the Holts found themselves completely alone. From that night forward, the house descended into chaos. The very walls seemed to shudder with an unseen force. The floorboards creaked as though they were being dragged down by the weight of unseen bodies. At night, Isabella woke to feel a crushing weight on her chest, pinning her to the bed. She opened her eyes and saw him, a shadowed figure looming over her, his wide-brimmed hat casting a dark shadow across his face, eyes glinting with a sinister light. She tried to scream, but no sound escaped her lips. His mouth twisted into a ghastly smile, a look of possession as he leaned closer and whispered in a voice dripping with malice, "Mine." Isabella broke free from the trance with a scream, the shadow vanishing as Eldridge jolted awake beside her. That same night, Gregory woke with a scream, his voice barely a whisper as he pointed to his closet, where he claimed the man with the hat had watched him all night. Eldridge pulled open the closet door, but found only empty darkness. Yet something lingered in the air, a heavy, oppressive feeling that seemed to throb with a malicious presence. Days later, a scratching sound began within the walls, a faint but constant scraping that could not be ignored. It would travel from one end of the hallway to the other, moving as if something were trapped within the very framework of the house. Frustrated, Eldridge pried open a section of the wall, expecting to find rodents or some other explanation. Instead, he found an empty void, a pocket of darkness where there should have been insulation or studs. And from that darkness, a whisper seeped out. "Come closer." The voice was low, insistent, luring him. It spoke with a familiarity that made his skin crawl, repeating, "Come closer, closer." Eldridge's hand trembled as he reached out, compelled by some dark pull. He snapped back at the last moment, shaking his head, and quickly sealed up the wall. But the scratching resumed that night, louder than ever, as if the creature within were furious at being denied. Another evening, Isabella ventured into the cellar, needing to retrieve canned goods. She avoided the cellar whenever possible. There was something about its damp, musty air that made her stomach churn. But with little choice, she descended into the dark, her flashlight illuminating the cobwebbed shelves. As she turned to leave, her light fell upon something on the floor, an old rusted axe lying in a thick pool of what appeared to be fresh, red liquid. Her breath caught as she reached for it, only to hear slow, deliberate breathing from behind her. She spun, but the cellar was empty. The breathing grew louder, closer, the air thick with a cold menace. In the shadows, she could make out a shape, large, hulking, watching her. Without a second thought, Isabella fled, slamming the cellar door shut, her pulse racing. Even then, she could still hear the breathing on the other side, a slow, mocking rhythm. Then came the final night. As the family huddled together, they heard a creak outside their bedroom door. The doorknob turned slowly, the sound filling them with dread, but no one entered. Isabella gathered the children close, whispering reassurances as Eldridge went to check the door, gripping a lamp as his only weapon. In the hallway, he saw him, the man in the hat, his face a hideous mask of twisted hatred. He held the axe, its blade glinting, a dull and lifeless gleam. Eldridge raised the lamp, but the man stepped closer, the shadows stretching around him, his laugh filling the air. Eldridge screamed for his family to run. They scrambled down the stairs, the figure lumbering after them, his footsteps a relentless thudding. As they neared the front door, Isabella glanced back, her breath catching as she saw him reach out, fingers elongated, eyes hollow and watching. They burst into the night air, the heavy door slamming shut behind them. From the safety of the mountain road, they watched, heart pounding, as the house fell into a tense silence, its windows dark and unyielding, as if sealing itself shut. The Holts left the mountain, leaving behind the cursed home and the specter of George Weathers. But each night, as they closed their eyes, they could still feel him lurking at the edges of their dreams, an endless haunting reminder of the horrors they had survived, and the home that would forever keep its dark secrets.